Imagine a guy in your neighborhood driving a 10-year-old truck and wearing a plain hoodie. Most people walk right past him, assuming he's just getting by. But behind the scenes, he's managed to save in 5 years what takes the average person 20. That's 15 years of his life he just bought back. He's a minimalist. He lives in a house that's probably smaller than what he could afford because he'd rather have space to breathe than rooms to clean. Inside, there's no clutter, no junk drawer, and no trendy furniture bought on a payment plan. He only owns things that add real value to his life. A few high-quality tools, a comfortable bed, and books he actually reads. Everything he owns is paid for. When he walks through his front door, he isn't looking at a list of debts. He's looking at a life he completely owns. Now, compare him to the guy 3 houses down. He's got the brand new SUV and a house with vaulted ceilings that looks like a museum. From the street, he looks like he's winning, but inside he's drowning in stuff. His kitchen is packed with gadgets he doesn't use, and his closets are overflowing with clothes he doesn't wear. Every corner of that house represents a monthly bill he has to hustle for. He's terrified that one bad week at work could ruin everything. He's got the image of wealth, but the bank owns his time. Meanwhile, the minimalist in the old truck actually has the freedom. He's part of the silent rich. He figured out that wealth isn't about how much you can collect, it's about how much you can let go of to buy back your peace. It's called minimalist money. In this video, I'm breaking down the quiet, simple rules these people use to stay wealthy without the stress. You'll want to stick around for the very last one because it's the exact opposite of what you've been told, and it completely changed how I look at my own bank account. Rule number 1, one in, one out. Think about someone like Claire. She makes a pretty average salary and lives in a basic apartment. On paper, you'd assume she's just scraping by like everyone else, but she actually has plenty of breathing room. When someone asked her how she does it, she just said, "I don't let things pile up." She's talking about her stuff, but it's really a mindset. Claire has this rule: if something new comes in, something old has to go. If she gets a new jacket, an old one gets donated. If she picks up a new streaming subscription, she cancels one she isn't using. It's not just about decluttering your closet. It's about putting a cap on how much you consume. It forces you to actually think for a second before you buy something. The way this works for your money is simple. Before you buy anything that isn't a necessity, you have to name exactly what it's replacing. If it's not replacing anything, you have to wait 48 hours. Most of the time, that impulse to buy something disappears after a couple of days. The only things left are the ones that actually matter. Rule number 2, know your enough number. Most financial advice is always about more. Earn more, save more, buy more. But almost nobody stops to ask the one question that actually matters: how much is enough? Take a guy like Marcus. He was a manager in his early 40s, and he kept moving the goalposts on himself. When he was making $30,000, he thought $50,000 would solve all his problems. Once he hit 50, he was convinced he just needed to get to 70. By the time he was closing in on 6 figures, he was more stressed about money than ever before. It wasn't because he didn't have enough, it was because his lifestyle grew every time he got a raise. The goalpost just kept moving. He didn't have an income problem. He had an enough problem. The rule for minimalist money is to define your enough number clearly. I'm not talking about some vague dream. I mean an actual figure. What monthly income would honestly cover your life and keep you from being stressed? Once you have that specific number, every decision you make has a reference point. You stop chasing more just because everyone else is, and you start building toward a target you can actually hit. That one mindset shift alone changes everything. Rule number 3, automate the boring part. One thing you'll notice about people who are actually stable with their money is that they don't rely on willpower. They've completely removed it from the equation. Most people handle their savings the same way. They get their paycheck, spend what they need to spend throughout the month, and then plan to save whatever is left over. The problem is, there's usually nothing left. Spending has a way of expanding to fill up whatever space you give it. If the money is sitting in your account, you're going to find a reason to use it. The minimalist approach flips that. You decide what you're going to save ahead of time, and you automate it so that money leaves your account the second your paycheck hits. You do it before you see it, before you can spend it, and before it even starts to feel like yours. There was a guy named Daniel who started doing this with just 10% of his salary after years of failing to save a dime. He set up an automatic transfer for his paycheck and basically just forgot it existed. 8 months later, he had more money in the bank than he'd managed to save in the previous 4 years combined. It wasn't because he got a big raise. It was because he stopped trying to be disciplined and just built a system instead. The rule is simple. Automate your savings, your bills, and your investments. Make the responsible choice the default setting for your life. Then, you can live on whatever is left over without feeling guilty because the important stuff is already taken care of. Rule number 4. Buy less, buy better. This next rule sounds a bit backwards until you actually sit down and do the math. Most people who are trying to save money naturally look for the cheapest option. They go for the budget version, the one that gets the job done right now. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, and sometimes it's really the only choice you have. But if that's your default strategy for everything, it almost always ends up costing you way more in the long run. Think about something simple like shoes. You can buy a $30 pair that wears out and falls apart in 5 months, or you can spend $120 on a pair that lasts you 4 years. The cheap option feels like the responsible move at the cash register, but the math tells a completely different story over time. The minimalist money principle here isn't about being fancy or splurging. It's about buying fewer things, making sure they're high quality, and then holding on to them as long as possible. This stops that constant cycle of having to replace everything you own. It also cuts down on decision fatigue because you aren't constantly shopping for the same items over and over. The question you should ask before any big purchase isn't, what is the cheapest version of this? Instead, ask, what is the best value over the entire lifespan of this thing? Those are 2 very different questions, and they lead to 2 very different financial futures. Rule number 5. Never make a financial decision under emotion. Take a look at a guy like Jordan. He's smart, he works hard, and for the most part, he's actually pretty sensible with his money. But whenever life got stressful, maybe a rough week at the office or a fight with his partner, he'd start spending. It wasn't anything huge or dramatic. It was usually a new gadget, a few nights of expensive takeout, or some clothes he didn't really need. None of it felt reckless when he was doing it, but every emotional low had a price tag attached to it. Over time, those little treat yourself moments added up to thousands of dollars a year. He was paying for temporary relief that never actually fixed the root of the problem. What Jordan was dealing with is emotional spending. It's one of the biggest reasons people who are trying their best to save still end up falling short, yet nobody really talks about it. The minimalist rule for this is tough, but it's simple. You don't make any significant financial decisions on the same day you're feeling a strong emotion. That goes for the good days too. The high of a big win can make an expensive celebration feel justified, just like a bad day makes retail therapy feel necessary. Neither one is a good financial choice. The practical way to handle this is a mandatory waiting period. Anything over a certain amount, maybe it's $50 or $100, gets a 24-hour pause if it wasn't planned. You aren't necessarily trying to talk yourself out of it. You're just making sure the decision is coming from your brain and not from whatever mood you happen to be in. You'd be shocked how much that one habit can save you over a year. If this gave you a different way of thinking about financial stability, share it with someone who needs a simpler approach, because most people are overcomplicating this and they don't have to be. So drop in the comments which rule hit hardest for you. And with that said, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. And with that said, have a great day and see you in the next one.